Hey, LinkedIn, and welcome back to Business Unusual, a live show where we are talking with you about how the coronavirus is impacting the ways that we all work. I'm your host, Caroline Fairchild, coming to you from my home office here in New York City. The coronavirus pandemic has had a devastating impact on the small business community, with millions being forced to close their doors or lay off workers as revenue streams come to a halt. We're seeing a lot of you have conversations about this on LinkedIn. The federal government has passed a $2.2 trillion stimulus effort, in large part to support these businesses. $350 billion of that program is going towards the Paycheck protection program. And almost 70% of small businesses have applied for those loans, according to recent surveys. As I said, we're seeing a lot of you on LinkedIn having questions about the Paycheck protection program. So on today's show, we hope to answer some of them, well, most of them if we can. I'm speaking with LinkedIn small business editor Jordan Dahl, who's going to tell us what she's seen both on and off LinkedIn, the common questions, and what the issues are with the program to date. And then later on in the show, we're going to talk to Karen Mills, who led the Small Business Association during the Great Recession. So if you have questions right now on the stream, the whole point of today's show is to get those answered and have a conversation about what's going on the ground for you. So please let us know in the stream. We'll get your questions answered on today's show. Hundreds of you are already talking about how the coronavirus is impacting your community and your business on the ground right now on LinkedIn. I want to show a couple of the comments that we've been seeing on the platform to jumpstart our conversation. This is one from Wayner, who says, this loan, the PPP, like for a company like me, means a lot. We've decided based on the incentives to not lay off the majority of our employees. This is something that we're seeing a lot of small business owners weigh is, should we do layoffs? Should we furlough employees? Should we keep our loans, should we keep our doors open? So Wayner comes in with that. We have another share from Teresa, who's really talking about her employees. This is something that we're seeing a lot of business owners come to the platform and say, this is something that it's an emotional decision for me to figure out what to do with my employees, who in some cases are like my family. So Teresa, thank you for those insights as well. And then we also have a comment here from Mike, who is talking to us about what these loans really mean for his business and what's going on the ground for him. He's the chief executive officer at Longhorn Organics. And he says, it's hard to see how most small firms have a chance to understand the possibilities and processes. In general, applying for the loans has been complete confusion. Mike, you're definitely not alone. We're seeing hundreds of small business owners have just a lot of confusing questions about when they should expect to hear back, what the process is. I'm going to go ahead and bring in LinkedIn's small business editor, Jordan Dahl, who's been following all of this on and off LinkedIn to hopefully give us a little bit more insight. Hi, Jordan. How are you doing? I think that you're on mute, but hopefully our producers will fix it.
Sorry.
No worries. Good morning, Jordan. Thank you so much for joining us. You've been covering this maniacally on LinkedIn. You're seeing lots of what's going on. How is the small business community faring, and what's going on this week with regards to the Paycheck Protection Program?
Yeah, as you detailed, small business owners have been having a really hard time with all of this. And like many of us, they are struggling to understand when they might be open, when things will go back to normal. And that uncertainty has been very difficult for them, particularly as they are making decisions. You saw that in those comments about whether or not to furlough employees, whether to keep them on, how long they might be able to stay open and stay alive. Small business has an average of 27 days of runway. That is not a big gap in which to figure out these loans and these programs and stay alive. And so that's been something that's been very difficult for business owners.
Right. And the lending program got off to a really rocky start. What happened and why has it been so rocky?
There's been a lot of confusion about who is eligible, how to apply, while the Small Business Administration is backing these loans, that they are not giving them out. So business owners need to go to their individual lenders in order to get those loans. However, banks are saying that they were not given enough information from the federal government when this program first launched on April 3rd for small businesses. And so when it opened at midnight, a lot of banks said that they were not able to take in applications, they didn't have enough guidance. And so there was a lot of confusion around that. And because there has been so much interest in these loans, many banks are deciding that they are going to serve people who are already existing customers with them, people who have credit cards, who already have business loans. So for those who do not already have a lending relationship with the bank, they're really in danger of being left out in the cold with this.
Such a challenging time. And not only is there confusion around how to get the loans, but there have been some changes since the first loan program came out with regards to disaster loans. What do we know about that?
Yes, exactly. So the disaster loans were passed a few weeks back. They were the first round of stimulus available for small business owners. And when that program was enacted, small business owners could take out a loan up to $2 million. Well, late last week, the New York Times reported that the Small Business Administration is actually capping that at $15,000, which is significantly less and not a lot of money for most business owners. On top of that, there is also a $10,000 grant that business owners can apply for right after applying for the disaster loan. They are supposed to get that grant within 3 days of applying. Most business owners, though, are reporting that they have not received that, and there's still not a lot of word about when they might get that funding.
Well, I'm already seeing a lot of questions in the stream from small business owners who are eager to speak with you, Jordan and Karen. I'm going to go ahead and bring Karen Mills into the show. Karen led the Small Business Administration during the Great Recession. We're lucky to have her. Karen, I'll let you and Jordan have a conversation. I'm going to jump into the stream and make sure that we get all these questions answered on the show.
Thanks, Caroline. Hi, Karen. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Jordan. It's really nice to be with you. And it's really nice to have a chance to talk to America's small business owners. This is the most difficult time for small business I have seen in my lifetime. And we are going to get through it together, but we really need to get this money flowing into their hands because, as you mentioned, small business owners have very low cash buffers. They only have 27 days, 2 or 3 weeks. And right now, we've been in this for 2 or 3 weeks. So small business owners are looking at that May 1st rent payment and saying, am I going to make it? I'm hoping today we're going to be at the start of a fresh week and we're going to see some green shoots on some of these payments flowing.
Great. And what can you tell us about these programs? For example, the Paycheck Protection Program, there's been a lot of questions from members, particularly from sole proprietors and contractors. Can you walk us through a couple of the details about who might be eligible for these loans?
Yes, so there's a couple of pieces of good news about the Paycheck Protection Program. The first is that it's really big. It may not be big enough, but $349 billion is a lot of money. When I was head of the Small Business Administration in the 2009 crisis, it was pretty bad. And we did some very aggressive things. We put out $30 billion, a record year for SBA. Well, now we're talking about 349, 10 times a record year. So it's been a bumpy start. But I do want to say that I am pleased with the fact that there is a provision in this to make these loans into grants. And this is what small business owners need. The purpose of getting the money out is to get 8 weeks of basically payroll so that people can pay their employees. And as one of your small business owners pointed out, small businesses think of their employees like family. So you want to make sure that they can stay on the health care, that they can stay employed, rather than go to unemployment, which many, many have had to do. In the provisions, you can actually rehire folks, and you can also pay some permitted expenses like your rent, debt service, utility bills. So you want to see if you can get the payment protection plan. You can get a bigger loan, but only a certain amount of it, 2.5 months of your payroll can be forgiven. So right now, go to your bank, go to the first lines of defense that you've got, and see if they are giving you these applications. And hopefully this week, they're going to start funding some of the loans that have been pre-approved. We're told $200 billion has been approved, but only 1% of the money is flowing. Got it.
And we've touched a little bit on your background. You headed the SBA during the Great Recession. For you, that was a banner year of funding. What advice do you have for business owners? What lessons were gleaned from the Great Recession that might apply to business owners today while they're looking at these loans and figuring out what to do with their business?
Well, we have a different situation today than we did back then. Then the banks weren't lending. Today, the problem is small businesses are closed through no fault of their own. And in fact, they should be closed for their own safety, their personal safety, the safety of their employees and their communities. So the big question today is uncertainty. How long is this going to last? And what should you do about your business? And one of the things to do right in this moment, besides going to get as much money as possible from all the programs, is to think about your business with a fresh eye. You know what? You might all of a sudden realize you've been doing some things that maybe aren't necessary to run the business really well. Maybe there are expenses that you can cut out when you restart. You should think about what customers are really profitable for you. What are your most important customers? And focus on them first. What are the products that your customers really value from you? Maybe you can do a little bit more online today. So one of the hopes is that while we are going to talk about how to get this funding and some other ways that you might be able to get it in the coming weeks, we also should think about how are you going to change your business for the better for the future? How can you get advice and counsel from other business owners in your community to know when it's safe to open? And how can you build maybe a fresh start off of these difficult times?
Absolutely. And it's a great point. We're seeing a lot of members chiming in on the platform, helping each other out, talking about how they're changing their business models, particularly restaurant owners who are now having to shift to delivery. So I'm glad that you're highlighting that for them. In terms of the other program that Caroline and I were talking about, the disaster loans, can you briefly give us a brief overview of that, of how business owners can tap into that loan program and what might be available for them?
So the SBA Disaster Loan Program is a long-time tried and true program. We used it in the BP oil spill a number of years ago. And these are loans that come directly from the SBA. Now, usually, the disaster occurs only in one geography. So they're a bit overwhelmed because the terrific folks who run this disaster program, if there's a hurricane, they go to the hurricane. Well, today they're working remotely and they're trying to process $7 billion worth of these loans. And one of the reasons, I don't know this for sure, but I expect one of the reasons that they have pushed down the amount of the disaster loans is that the first authorization was $7 billion, which sounded like a lot 3 weeks ago, but now, of course, is not a lot of money. And they're trying to make it last and get to as many businesses as possible. I am told that the Senate and the congressional Democrats have put another $50 billion for these economic disaster loans from SBA into the bill that we hope will pass this week. And what I'm saying to Congress is, we need the money. We need another tranche for the Paycheck protection program, and we need another big tranche for these disaster loans. This $10,000 upfront grant, you can get that in addition to the PPP, so it's worth doing, definitely. And I think they'll make their way through the bottleneck. As I said, this is more overwhelming than the SBA has ever faced, and I do want to shout out to all the people on the ground in the SBA offices, in the banks, who are really trying to help their small business community. I know they're working really hard. I know it's frustrating because this thing, wasn't clear from the beginning, but this may be the week where some of that starts getting ironed out. And once it gets ironed out, it's like an aircraft carrier, it can deliver a lot of force once we get it moving in the right direction.
Yeah, let's hope so. Caroline, sounds like you have some questions from the feed. What are we hearing from members?
We have lots of questions in the stream right now. So Karen, thank you so much for joining us. I think that they want that engine, as you said, to start revving up. Lots of questions from Wes, Shelley, and Ken about just recommendations to start about where to apply. I guess there are, a lot of small business owners who haven't applied yet that would love your tips. And then I'm also seeing a question from Matthew asking, how do you get as much funding as possible? We're seeing a lot of questions around that as well. So where do you start if you haven't applied yet? And then any tips for maximizing how to make sure that you're benefiting from the funds as much as possible?
So there's some good news from over the weekend, and it comes in the form of some of the fintechs. I just wrote a book last year on fintech, small business, and the American dream. And even I could not imagine what a dramatic change this crisis is going to invoked for the fintechs. I'm talking about Square, PayPal, QuickBooks, Cabbage. All four of them have gotten approved, I believe, to be direct SBA lenders. And for instance, so I would go first to your bank. But if you don't have a bank and a bank relationship, or you haven't been able to get through that process, also go to one of these players. I know that that Intuit, just right before I got on this program, they are the owners of QuickBooks. They developed this engine, which kind of feels like TurboTax. They ask you a series of questions. If you are a QuickBooks owners, they can pull the information about your payroll and forms that you might have on file there and submit it automatically. In some large percent of the cases, it will be a 10-minute process. And boy, that is what we need, a less intensive 10-minute process. Now, if you are an independent contractor or a self-employed person and you don't have all these records, the good news is that the program does apply to you. We fought very hard because there are 24 million independent gig economy workers, people who this is their, their business, they're the only employee. And it turns out you can apply. It's just that banks are finding that confusing because they've never had to deal with you as an independent business before. But I believe that these new players like Square and PayPal and others have geared up a portal and information from them to let you know what it is that you need and to make a more seamless way to apply. So in addition to your bank, I would choose one of those and start those processes. And they should come online this week, and they think they're going to do 100 billion or so. So I think this could be a moment where the banks get a wake-up call from some of these new fintechs.
Great. And one other thing to note is that these programs are now open to all business owners. For small businesses, they opened on April 3rd, and now contractors and the sole proprietors that you're talking about, they could start applying on last Friday on April 10th.
People in your business who are 1099 employees, they are not employees, they need to apply themselves as an independent contractor, and they will be covered, although they need to provide documentation of what they got paid.
That's a great point. Thank you for that, Karen. We're getting a lot of contractors and businesses who employ them asking, like you mentioned before, employees are really family to these business owners and they want to do right by them. Caroline, what else are people saying in the feed?
Definitely seen some questions around 1099 and freelance workers. So Karen, thanks for hitting on that. The other big theme in the stream right now is around timing. People have applied, they haven't heard back. Brian's wondering if his bank is dragging. Should he apply through another institution? A lot of confusion right now about when you should hear back. I know it's kind of a sliding scale, Karen, but what can you say to those in the stream about timing?
It's very variable out there. I got some data this morning from Alignable, which is a great resource for small business owners. It has about 4.5 million small businesses in its network, and they advise and counsel each other. Well, they surveyed and they said about 50% have applied, with another 20% about to apply, and only 1% have gotten funded. So what's happening? Well, it turns out that even if the SBA has approved billions and hundreds of billions of dollars of this, they say they've approved 200 billion already. Where is the money? And the answer is the money gets funded by each individual bank. And the bank has to take it from their balance sheet. And banks are not that quick at funding in normal days. So I think it is caught up with the processes of funding. I am hopeful that we'll see that 1% really grow. But just to hedge your bets, I would also go to a second lender, perhaps one of these new online lenders that's coming on board. If you go to the QuickBooks or Intuit site, you can find it. Square just announced this morning they're going to be up and running in the middle of the week, and they are getting capital from outside providers. Now, one thing to note, it's a bit technical, but the Federal Reserve has said that all these loans, which are 100% guaranteed by the government, they are going to buy them off the balance sheets of banks. And they have not yet begun to do that loan purchasing. So some of this maybe banks are holding back a little bit of funding because they don't want all the money to go off their balance sheet and not get replenished immediately by the Fed. I heard over the weekend that it's going to take the Fed 10 days to do this. And my message to them is a lot of small businesses don't have 10 days. So if this is what is gumming up the works, they need to move a little faster.
Yeah, 10 days in the small business world is a very long time, unfortunately for them. Caroline, do we have any other questions that are coming in?
Yes, there is a question here from Elle about, is this a forgivable loan? If it's not paid back, what happens? I read this early on, she says, so it's labeled, but she's still very confused. If you could speak to that.
So the answer is that you can get forgiveness on 8 weeks of payroll. Now, there's a bunch of caveats. There are permitted expenses in addition to payroll, but they can only be about 25% of the amount that is forgiven. And those expenses, I'll just repeat them. Rent is one, mortgage payments, interest on loans, and then, of course, payroll plus benefits. And so you have to look at what you submit for your payroll documentation, and that is going to be the part, 8 weeks of that gets forgiven. And there's some other criteria, which is you have to actually be paying your employees. So if you've let them go, you have to bring them back. The new QuickBooks, this is where people get confused also. People who make over $100,000, it's only up to $100,000. We want this to be for the people who need it most, and we want it to be for the small businesses who need it the most. That's how Congress tried to rate this. So that's why I think people are having a little bit of trouble with the criteria, but part of it is forgivable, and the other part is a 1% loan. I think it has a 2-year duration. The SBA disaster loans are a bit longer, and only the $10,000 in the beginning is a grant.
Great. Thank you for that, Karen. In terms of employees and calculating this payroll cost, that's a question I've seen from a lot of members. They're a little confused about how to calculate that. Is there a certain date? Is it an average? How do they determine how many employees they need to have on their payroll in order for it to be forgiven?
So for small business owners, the best thing to do, the rules are a little bit complicated, and the place that people get confused, I think, is this question about people who make over $100,000. But the best way to do it is to look on either the SBA site, the Treasury CARES site. Lots of people have very good summaries. And if you want an even faster thing, I just saw the Intuit QuickBooks calculator, which walks you through a series of questions, as I mentioned, TurboTax style. And as you answer those questions, it tells you exactly how to calculate it. We have been waiting for 10 days for this quick calculator, and I believe it is out. So if you just go to Intuit QuickBooks PPP, I believe you should be able to get on that. They just announced that that's going to be live today. So that could be a benefit to all you small business owners out there who have been having trouble with the calculation.
We've seen some questions here about both. Can you apply to both programs, the disaster relief program as well as PPP? And if so, how do you do that? And then there's some questions here from Don and Ron as well about if you've already applied through your bank, can you apply through Intuit as well?
So the answer is you can apply and take a loan both from the SBA Disaster Economic Injury Program and from the PPP, as long as you don't use it for the same purpose. You can't pay yourself twice. So those loans can stand side by side, and you should apply separately, because remember, the economic injury loan is a direct government loan from the SBA, and the PPP is through your bank or through one of these fintechs. What I've been telling people is apply multiple places, but don't take two of the same loan because you'll get in trouble. So you need to make sure that you have a couple irons in the fire, but only take one loan for one purpose, because we need to have enough to make sure everybody gets some. And, that's the purpose is one loan for each purpose. But you can have two, an economic injury loan and a PPP loan, and let them stand side by side if you use one to pay your people and one to pay your rent.
So one other thing that has been coming up for members is knowing who to go to and who is a qualified lender and who is not. As with every crisis, we've unfortunately seen some predatory lenders coming out and trying to take advantage of business owners. So how can business owners really vet the people who are making offers to give out these loans and ensure that they are in fact authorized to give out the Paycheck Protection Program loan, for example?
The only people who are authorized today are SBA 7A lenders. And those people or people who have been specially approved by SBA and the Treasury. If other people are offering you loans or assistance, do not take them. It is very explicit in this bill that money is not supposed to be flowing to these alternative areas. And hopefully this week there will be enough sources that you should not be tempted, no matter how good and how easy the offer. I think a recognized name brand in this case, or a bank with whom you've had a relationship, is the way to go.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for that. We're seeing tons of questions in the stream. I do want to remind everyone that this live stream will be available after we wrap as well. So some questions have already been answered. So be sure and rewind and check out all of Karen's great insights. Karen, it's been great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. And listen, thank you all. One thing I do want to say to small business owners, don't give up hope. You are so critical to our economy. You know, half the people who work in this country own or work for a small business. You are the American dream. And if we lose too many small businesses, we won't be able to recover. It will not be a U-shape or a V-shape recovery because it's hard to start new businesses. So hang in there, do the very best you can, take advantage of all this help. Hopefully easier help is on the way, and stay the course. Take this as a chance to maybe rethink your business, and hopefully we'll make some lemonade out of these lemons. Stay safe.
Thank you, Karen.
Great advice.
Such great advice from Karen. And I started off this show so pessimistic about the Paycheck Protection Program and everything that's going on with small business owners, but Karen really brought in the perspective that help is on the way. I didn't know that about the fintech companies coming in to step up and hopefully start processing these loans. So Jordan, what was your kind of highlights from the interview?
Definitely, that was a big one. And just going through the different details of the program is so helpful. There's been so much confusion and different changes, and it's a lot to keep track of, especially when you're trying to figure out your payroll and your rent and running a business. So really great of Karen to come on and answer those questions and sort of lay that out for everyone.
And Jordan, thank you for joining us as well. If you are on the stream right now and you have a small business or questions about small business, be sure and follow Jordan Dahl. She has a newsletter where she is tracking all of this day and night for you. So Jordan, thank you for all your work and for answering questions and for coming on Business Unusual.
Thank you for having me.
That is all that we have for Business Unusual today. I want to remind everyone on the stream again that if you have questions about small business, rewatch the show. Karen and Jordan answered a lot of them already, but also check out Jordan Dahl's newsletter. You can follow her on LinkedIn to get daily insights into how the coronavirus is impacting small business. This is Business Unusual, a daily show where we're talking about how the coronavirus is impacting the ways that we all work. Tomorrow, we are going to have insights from a new survey out on LinkedIn about how confidence in the workforce is changing. We'll be talking about that with some experts. So please join us again tomorrow, Tuesday at 12 Eastern. I'm Caroline Fairchild. Thank you so much for joining us.